Okay, I'm not gonna lie, I'm somewhat of a trauma bonding hoe. Does anyone else think the term trauma bonding and the concept in general is kind of weird? Because here's the thing, some people think that it's actually just a codependent, sometimes positive thing. Other people regard it as something that happens that's a lot more abusive. And I think the issue is a lot of us use the word more casually, when in reality, it is more of a serious thing. Well, in this episode, I want to break down what trauma bonding is, how it encompasses things like love bombing, gaslighting, all the stuff, and in general, just like what my experience has been with it, and how to deal with it as an empath and a highly sensitive person. Okay, let's get into it. Hello, welcome or welcome back to the Feeling My Feelings podcast, where I feel my feelings and I invite you guys to do the same. I'm the type of person who has basically built relationships off of trauma bonds, not because I was always aware of it, but because it was mostly what I knew. And I will preface this by saying I'm not a therapist. And actually, I'm a person who picked up the word trauma bond and probably also misused it, like a lot of people are, with a lot of these psychology terms. Dude, trauma bonding, what is it? Well, in general, a lot of people think that trauma bonding is when you and another person undergo a traumatic experience together and you are bonded through that and you develop a codependency through that. Sometimes it is specific situations or ongoing abuse that you guys handle together and you're bonded. Sometimes you and another person get into a relationship, you become codependent, then abuse happens, and then you are bonded. So see the difference? I think it's more the latter that is literally what the term is supposed to be. And more people are using the term as that casual, like, oh, we both, had like a terrible boss together, like we're bonded. Either way, I'm going to talk about both types of situations as they pertain to me. Okay, so they say that there are 7 stages of trauma bonding. The first one is love bombing. Which is something that I did a previous video about, something I know very well about, where oftentimes someone who could be considered a narcissist or someone who generally wants your attention, who wants to pull you in quickly, they will love bomb you with gifts, with big, big ideas of like marriage, of like, let's have kids, of let's go on vacations and stuff. They'll kind of reel you in. They also want you to like them so that you are stuck with them. And then they might not actually form a genuine bond with you in particular. They may just want someone around to be attached to them. That's what I consider love bombing to be. A lot of people will be really excited and rush in right away in relationships, so I definitely understand that. And you will be infatuated right away in relationship. So when is it love bombing? When sometimes you are using manipulative tactics within those gifts, within all that attention. Okay, I'm pausing here because I watched back the video and I realized I didn't nearly scratch the surface of what a lot of my trauma bonding toxic relationships were like. And a lot of what I'm saying is the side of it where I realized I was being very insecure, where I realized I was feeling insecure, but I clung on to someone who was talking down to me anyway. And that's kind of the main point here. A lot of the times you feel like it's your fault and you don't know if the other person is just more confident than you, is actually controlling, is narcissistic. So I will follow up on this video with more examples of what the other person does, what a narcissistic person does in a romantic trauma bonding relationship. Okay. I would have people that I dated who basically just wanted somebody. And then they didn't genuinely care about my feelings. They didn't want to talk about me. They wanted to throw things at me, have me attached to them. And then they'd start to wait to see if I'd get jealous. They'd want attention from me constantly. They basically just want someone there for you. And I will just ask the question of, like, when you're being love bombed and you're wondering if it's bad, just try to figure out, what is the rush? Why do you think this person is rushing so hard to get to you? Yes, they may really like you, but you may be filling a void for them. That's the key here. No matter how much they like you or don't like you, or how light the actual abuse is, they're doing something to fill a void for them. You could be anyone. Do you get it? Okay, so firstly, people love bomb. They try to draw you in with their gifts and everything, and they promise you things. And so a second specific stage after love bombing is creating trust and dependency. So that's kind of what I was talking about. Whereas like they will draw you in even deeper because they're like, oh, I can see a future with you. I can, see getting married to you. I will have people say this to me after a couple weeks of dating. I will have someone just say, I love you after a couple of weeks, even though we didn't really get to know each other. Again, infatuation, sure. This becomes bad when it becomes bad. Okay, so these are things to watch out for. This second stage is becoming dependent on each other. And then in this stage, I will notice right away that when I'm not around this person anymore, I'll feel a little bit anxious. I'll feel like, oh, I need to see them soon. And again, this could be infatuation or it's codependency. You could be also, during this stage, you might start to feel like, oh, this is my person already. Oh, I'm set. Oh, I don't want to think about anyone else. And you might be factoring them into your plans. And it's only been 2 weeks or something. Again, this is a stage where you want to really try to screen if you're infatuated and if it's going into the codependency realm. Can you really get your tasks done? Can you go throughout your day without thinking about them too much? Can you not feel even do you feel like some of your insecurities are coming up and you're like, oh no, this person hasn't texted me back in a couple of hours. They must be seeing somebody else. Is your world starting to revolve around this person too quickly? So that's building dependency. Okay. And then stage 3, something happens. Something shifts. When you're trauma bonding, the person usually, I guess in this sort of scenario, a lot of people, therapists, psychologists, think that trauma bonding ends up being abuse within a relationship that creates dependency, that creates a long-term attachment. Usually abuse from one person to the other, but in reality, sometimes it ends up in the end mutually abusive, although one person was more so the instigator. The other person just reacts, which sometimes can be considered abusive behavior, but mostly they're reacting. Okay, so the third stage is they'll start to criticize. So you, during the first 2 stages, were being treated like a queen, like the love of their life, like a king, like they were giving you gifts, they were giving you compliments, they were telling you you were the one right away. They wanted to spend the rest of your life with you. And you thought, oh, that must have meant loyalty. That must have meant I feel safe because someone's obsessed with me. I got them, so they're going to be loyal. Then all of a sudden, something happens where they turn around, whether consciously or unconsciously. A lot of the times it can be conscious, especially if they're manipulative and a narcissist. The love bombing wears off. And all of a sudden they stop making efforts to give you gifts and stuff, which can be fine and what happens in relationships. But then they slowly unravel and they no longer have the emotional capacity to keep up the love bombing, to keep up the lovey-dovey stuff. And then their true colors start to come out, as well as their true thoughts. And not only that, but their defensive thoughts, their, like their limiting beliefs. Sometimes, whatever insecurities come up, it'll come up as probably defensive and aimed at you, and they'll project onto you. So what happens is, for example, they'll start criticizing you even though they used to love things about you. For me, it was, oh, I love that you're so ambitious. Like, ideally, that's somebody that I want in my life. And then it turns around into, oh, you're just too ambitious. Like, I don't know, you seem like you're not, feminine enough or soft enough, or it feels like this actually isn't something you're capable of. And they start picking at you because now they got you. And this turns into more controlling behavior. So stage 4, they start gaslighting you. So I want to, sorry if this is a little bit like messy, but I just want to preface this by saying, again, this is a person who is manipulating one other person who may or may not be aware that they are, but either way, they're really believing in what they're doing. So either way, that's not healthy. So after the love bombing wears off and you create codependency, and then they start to criticize you and start to project onto you their insecurities, to be honest, because they're not going to look at themselves. They're not going to be self-aware enough to realize what's wrong with them. So that's why they start to project onto you and criticize you. And then they start to gaslight you. So that's stage 4. When they start to gaslight you, it's because they're trying to control you. Because at that stage, once they started criticizing you, they may have not been self-aware enough to realize, oh, I'm showing my true colors. Either way, they're trying to save face. So they will start telling you lies and make you feel crazy for it. So I used to have an ex that would be like constantly texting other people, probably still on a dating app while we were dating. And I remember looking at it and being like, wait, why do you still have your profile up? I thought you deleted it. And then he would like say weird things like, oh no, I had that up for X reason, or like, I never actually deleted it. I don't know when I told you that, and a lot of the times that gaslighting for me turned into someone who really wanted to make me jealous too. So they would turn around and be like, oh, you're insecure, babe. Don't feel insecure. I only love you. And then they'd start to bring up other things, like they'd comment like more heavily than usual on like how good or sexy another woman looks. And then they'd be like, oh, don't worry, babe. Are you feeling insecure? So it's manipulative, it's gaslighting, it's confusing, and it makes the other person feel like they have less power and they need to fix themselves. What jerks. Okay, so after you get to the gaslighting stage, then the person who is being abused, stage number 5, they start resignation. So resignation also, resignation is both the person pulls back, the abuser pulls back communication. They stop being like, in general, emotionally available at all. And they just become their full like manipulative self, sort of. But they're probably still charismatic. They're probably still saving face and stuff. But they're kind of leaning into their more controlling qualities. Okay. So they may start to manipulate you to the point where they tell you like, oh, you're always doing this wrong, or I do everything, or I've done so much. Here's a note. Someone who has love bombed a lot can also claim that they've done a lot for you and that they made so much effort. So when someone makes a lot of effort, they can always defend themselves when they say something bad to you, when they do something bad to you, because they're like, but I did all this. I did this, so you owe me. That is unhealthy. And so when they start resignation, sometimes they will, go cold on you, be emotionally unavailable, or get mad at you more often and say, well, I did all this. And then you, or the abusee, I guess, starts to fawn. The other person, the abusee, will start to try to make it up to them. They'll probably think that they're doing something wrong constantly. And this is completely unhealthy. But this is when it turns to, well, now the abusee feels attached, like they're doing something wrong. Also, like this person has done so much more for them. They feel stuck and they feel like they owe something. And they also lose their sense of self, which is the next stage, stage 6. A lot of the times when you're in relationships like this and you feel like you owe something to other people, when you're this attached, when you're this codependent, you end up losing your sense of self. I have been through this before in all sorts of types of relationships, but specifically dating, there would be points where I'd be like already exhausted, already drained, feeling like I didn't have time for my hobbies. I also was overly aware of what my boyfriend would think of my hobbies. He'd criticize like what I was doing, or he'd like want to spend time with me more, or I'd feel like I was always spending time with him. I never had time for myself. I wanted to talk to him about my issues, but he like at a certain point would stop listening and then would talk about his issues and then go, why are you crazy? Like, you're being too emotional. And so I would lose the ability to feel my feelings, which is the reason why I have this podcast. I feel invalidated a lot of the times because he was constantly doing this to me. I'd feel like, oh, I must be crazy. I feel like, oh, everything that I thought I felt is probably wrong. And so when you start to be gaslit a lot of the times and manipulated, you tend to question yourself all the time, which makes it hard for you to maintain your identity. And then you start to codependently like readjust yourself to the other person. So you start to lose yourself. Ugh. And then number 7, there ends up being an emotional addiction that is really unhealthy. Because at this point, you've lost your sense of self. And now your sense of self is just tied to this person. I remember when I was with an ex that I thought that I was like gonna marry and end up with, I was like, well, I guess this is the rest of my life. And it felt like anytime he was showing any sort of interest in somebody else, like all of my insecurities ended up exploding. Where before, like I may have had them, but before they weren't as bad as when all this happened. And so I felt that he had control over me, that if he wasn't around, like it's not that I didn't know what to do, but it just felt like I had to know, I had to be aware of where he was because that was what I was used to. I was aware of I had to be hypervigilant of how he was feeling all the time because I also didn't want to upset him. And so it started infiltrating my own life, and I felt like I didn't know how to feel except for around him. Yo. Okay, so I guess the question is, what do we do when we find ourselves in a trauma bond? Well, or if we find ourselves like wanting to trauma bond, if we realized that a previous relationship we had trauma bonded with somebody. Well, it's funny, during this video I was actually figuring out that it was truly a trauma bond with my ex. Well, firstly, I think really see a therapist. really talk to somebody about it. If at all you're feeling insecure, if at all you feel unsure or, confused in a relationship, definitely talk about it. Sometimes we feel shameful and we feel like, oh, I shouldn't talk to anybody about it. I should just be confident. I should just get over it. I should just up and break up with this person, which also I recommend. But I think it's really important to have a trusted advisor talk to you about what you're going through, because if you're sitting there still confused with yourself, I mean, hopefully you can stop and, self-soothe, but you want some help calming down from all that so that you can have someone else help you, have more tools so that you're not beating yourself up all the time. Because I feel like for me, I just got stuck beating myself up all the time, not only for thinking the things and all the insecurities that came up and exploded while I was with my ex, but also for even thinking about the fact that I let that happen. So it was important for me to talk to other people. Again, I recommend a therapist. I think it's good to talk it out with your trusted friends and stuff. There's a lot of further animosity. There's a lot of anger that can continue to come up when you're just talking to your friends about it, though. So I think it's important that you look that up. You look up resources. Even it may help to go to a support group. There are also support groups for codependency. And again, once something feels like it's not good, talk to somebody about it. And if you feel like at any time you can't talk to your partner that is in the trauma bond you think with you, that's a red flag. Okay. Also, again, I think watch out for these red flags when you are going for relationships. It can be hard to differentiate between infatuation and potentially something abusive. But I think for me, for example, I was used to only being in relationships with people that I could trauma bond and trauma dump with. However, recently I found I was already getting exhausted by being with somebody, and it was already getting kind of gaslighty. It was already getting love bombing. It was already getting critical, and I could tell that a lot of it was for his benefit and not mine. And so right there, I was able to recognize it after just 4 dates or so. And I'm really proud that I got to that point, because before I think I just would have wanted to stay in it because I just needed something. Now, if that's something that you're going through, if you feel like you really just want to be in a relationship, which often is what attracts these types of people, I know I've been there, then again, that's something to talk about with a therapist. How are you not feeling emotionally validated? Why are you looking to someone else to fill a void? For me, that's often because I feel like, I can be really negative and think, oh, there won't be anybody else. At least this person apparently is really trying to chase me. So that's good, right? He's obsessed with me, right? And there's an odd comfort that I have in that. But that's not genuine or balanced or healthy. So a thing to do is not only look into self-love, obviously we want to, but look into, why are my needs not being met just by myself? Why do I feel like I need to be in a relationship with anyone? Why do you feel like you need to be in a relationship with anyone? Are you looking for relationships to fill a void, or are they really someone that you want to spend your life with? These are questions that you can explore so that you don't fall into a trauma bonding trap. Also, side stories about the other type of trauma bonding, which is or what everybody else thinks is trauma bonding, which is you and a person experience something traumatic and then you bond. Something similar happens where it's an attachment. So this has happened, you make friends when you have a common enemy, right? Like at work. I had gone on a trip in the Philippines where we had to go on a 2-hour boat ride, and I had met a guy who was in the Navy at the time, and there was a point where this boat ride was super dangerous, was probably not well regulated. I love the Philippines, I'm Filipino, but it was a little sketch. So there was a point where he and I talked a lot on the boat, and he tried to calm me down, and then he told me about like things he was going through, and then we built a bond, and then we tried to maintain that afterwards, and it turned into like constant texting. Like, I was really excited, we were really infatuated with each other. After a while, like, he started being a little critical. He started to be a little bit manipulative. He was trying to make me jealous. He suddenly cut me off. And then he started trying to talk to me again. And it turned into this unhealthy thing. And I was really attached really fast. And I was thinking about him way too much. And it was just like, okay, this isn't a healthy bond. It was literally, we bonded over something emotionally difficult. We tried to hold on to it, but we realized, oh, we're kind of using each other for some sort of emotional validation and comfort. Again, there's levels of that that's healthy, but you can tell when it becomes unhealthy, generally when it doesn't serve your life and the rest of your dreams and everything else. And also when you just feel like all you want to do with another person is talk about problems, is to just trauma dump with them. So, okay. I hope this helps. Again, I'm not a therapist, but I really do want people to start exploring, why they've been feeling the way they feel, and to not judge themselves for it, but instead feel like they can self-soothe. Okay, until the next time, peace and love, bye-bye. Yay!